we do want to work together and be partners and find areas of common interest and alignment. Unfortunately, the oil pipeline is not one of those areas.
Tonight, pipeline discussions continue in Ottawa, with coastal leaders firm in their opposition to pipelines through their territory.
This would have been a pouch for water. This would have been used for tightening or loosening a bow and arrow.
Inuit artifacts unveiled to the public for the first time after making their way back from the Vatican.
Biggest thing for Christmas was miyagasagi is the other word. Miyagasagi is smudging.
And with the holidays fast approaching, we have a language lesson to help you connect with your guests at the dinner table. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. It was an historic day at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec, just across the river from downtown Ottawa. A number of Inuit artifacts, including a kayak more than 100 years old, were unveiled to the public for the first time. This after they were transported from the Vatican in Rome to Montreal on Saturday. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
Elder Daryl Nasagalak's descriptions brought this over 100-year canoe to life.
But this, you can see the actual wear marks, where a hunter, you can see that there's more grease on this side, so he was probably a right-handed guy. You can see beluga oil stains around the cockpit here.
They arrived in Montreal on Saturday and were transported to the museum on Monday. They'll be kept there for now, but Inuit Teprit Kanatami President Nate Nobed says this will not be their permanent home.
Well, there is a larger infrastructure piece that goes along with this story. And for Nunavut as a jurisdiction, even in the land claim agreement, there's consideration of the creation of a heritage center for that jurisdiction. That has yet to be realized. It would be wonderful if we could have museums and heritage spaces in each one of our 4 Inuit land claim regions so that we could get these items closer to our communities.
Canadian Museum of History President Carolyn Dramagai says storing the artifacts at the proper temperature is key.
So we have to really maintain them at a very stable level of humidity and temperature. And the belongings that we saw this morning, of course, are of organic material, which are extremely sensitive to variations of temperature and humidity. So ensuring that we're providing a stable environment for the items is very, very important.
This would have been a pouch for water. This would have been used for tightening or loosening a bow and arrow. This is a rope that was made most likely, I believe, by sealskin.
The Unveiled Regional Corporation helped coordinate the transfer of the artifacts. CEO Dwayne Smith says the last few days have been a whirlwind of activity he won't soon forget.
I mean, we were very, very emotional. Just the significance of it, the magnitude, unveiling it, just similar to today. It still hits us because this is a part of our history, our culture, our identity, our heritage.
Most of the artifacts are First Nations. However, the Assembly of First Nations was not present at today's event. They plan to have their own unveiling ceremony sometime in January. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Thanks, Fraser. Pipelines are once again dominating discussion on Parliament Hill, especially in light of the MOU Prime Minister Mark Carney signed with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith late last month. An MOU that promised a pipeline to be built from Alberta to the West Coast, and also promised to consult Indigenous peoples about any pipeline project. Pierre Poilievre's Conservative Party wants Carney to put up or shut up, portraying the promise as a mere pipe dream. To that end, they tabled a non-binding motion on Tuesday calling for a new pipeline to be built to the Pacific. Debate has been going on all day. The motion is being voted on at this very minute. Just before debate began, two coastal First Nations leaders held a press conference where they said no to any pipeline going through their territories. They still want to meet Carney and his ministers to talk about other economic prospects.
We are working with the federal government, the Prime Minister's office, and some of the other ministers to have a conversation. This is not a conversation that individually that we're having. We're going to have them come up to our territory to have that initial discussion. So we're planning to do that in sometime in the month of January.
But we also recognize the situation that the government is facing, and we do want to work together and be partners and find areas of common interest and alignment. Unfortunately, the oil pipeline is not one of those areas.
And we'll hope to bring you the results of that vote as soon as it ends. Meanwhile, as members of Parliament are voting today on the fate of that pipeline, APTN's Tina House has reaction from Vancouver.
It's voting day in Ottawa as members of Parliament vote to either say yes or no to support the proposed pipeline that would bring oil from Alberta through BC to the North Coast, which would then be loaded onto tankers to be sold to global markets. Robert Phillip is on the First Nations Leadership Council. He says without consulting with First Nations, this project will never go through. And with the recent signing of the MOU between the Prime Minister and Alberta Premier Smith, no consultations took place with First Nations or the Premier of BC on the pipeline.
We would have to talk with coastal First Nations, interior First Nations along the route, get a proponent, because it's very costly, as everybody knows, from TMX. We're talking, 40, if not now $50 billion. So because of all these many issues, and then what was imposed on the Alberta government with the MOU, in terms of clean energy and all of those other factors and conditions that the Prime Minister imposed.
And in Ottawa, Jason Aislaw, president of the Haida Nation Council, along with Christine Martin-Smith, had a message for the MPs about this project.
Today we are calling on all the MPs to stand with the coastal First Nations to uphold the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act and protect our coast, our coastal economy, our way of life from the catastrophic risks of an oil spill. The North Coast and Haida Gwaii is not just the source of our current economic livelihoods, but it's our home, it's our responsibility to look after our territories.
We have this framework here in British Columbia that we're building. We have an energy resource table that can, certainly look at technical aspects of any oil pipeline. We have a leadership council which comprises of the three organizations here in British Columbia. It's not rocket science. We just need to talk to the Aboriginal title holders and the treaty holders to have those discussions.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
It's been nearly 3 decades since a self-governing First Nation in northwestern Yukon signed its final agreement with the territorial government as one of its treaty partners. But it says in that time, the territory has done little to address its concerns about inactive mineral claims. Claims it says are harming its settlement land. Now it's taking the Yukon government to court. Sarah Connors has those details.
The Trondequitchin First Nation is suing the Yukon government, arguing it hasn't held up its end of the deal on encumbering rights. It filed a statement of claim in Yukon Supreme Court on December 4th. The First Nation says its settlement land is riddled with hundreds of mineral claims that existed before it signed its final agreement in 1998. These claims are known as encumbering rights, meaning they can encumber or limit the First Nation's use and enjoyment of its settlement land. According to the First Nation, it's been a problem for years. It claims successive governments have breached its final agreement by failing to properly manage idle and unlawful claims, causing damage to its settlement land. The lawsuit calls on the government to address the alleged mismanagement and uphold its treaty obligations. Hake Darren Taylor said in a news release, Trundagwitchin is not trying to undermine encumbering rights on our settlement land that are appropriately administered, but the Yukon government must be held accountable for doing nothing while other improper rights stop us from using our settlement land and causing us harm. We reached out to the First Nation for an interview, but did not receive one by airtime. A Yukon government spokesperson says they're aware of the lawsuit and they're reviewing it. They have not yet filed a statement of defense. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks, Sarah. Time for a quick break and just an update. The House of Commons has just defeated the Conservatives' party motion on a new pipeline. Stick around, there's more to come. Welcome back. 18 months ago, Roseanne Archibald, the former first female national chief of the Assembly of First Nations, launched a lawsuit against the AFN's then executive committee. Late last week, Archibald announced on social media that the case has since reached a new phase. Archibald called it the discovery stage of her lawsuit. She says for the past 18 months, settlement discussions were stalled and stonewalled by the AFN due to a lack of response. However, Archibald says the matter is now before Ontario Superior Court, where she says, quote, truth, evidence, and accountability can finally be fully examined. In July of 2023, Archibald was removed as national chief before she could finish her first term and was later blocked from participating in the AFN's AGA. Archibald is seeking $5 million in damages for breach of contract, oppression, and for legal fees from 2021 to 2022, and legal fees for her unlawful suspension after. In a statement of claim, Archibald said her and the former APTN National chief Perry Bellegarde butted heads over what has been called, quote, serious issues regarding the way the APTN and the executive committee were run. When she raised these issues, Bellegarde embarked on a campaign to retaliate against her for challenging authoritarian, gender discriminatory, misogynistic, patriarchal, manipulative, and non-democratic manner in which he ran the APTN, the claim said. In Manitoba, Brandon University has welcomed their first ever Indigenous counseling therapist. The university currently has over 500 Indigenous students. The Indigenous Peoples Centre at Brandon U is a space for all to learn, gather, and participate in events and activities. Deidre Gregory is the new counselor. She's a member of the Ebb and Flow First Nation. She received her degree from Brandon University in First Nations and Aboriginal counseling in 2009 and went on to earn her master's in education. On a post congratulating her, the Southern Chiefs organization wrote that Deidre believes the success is healing for many Indigenous students. Homeless services in Australia are buckling under the strain of the national housing crisis there, according to a new report from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. The latest data found almost 290,000 Australians asked for help from homeless services in the past year. 19,000 of those people were turned away. Women escaping violence, young people, and First Nations Australians are among those increasingly relying on support services. NITV reporter Marcellus Nlaga visited Adelaide's biggest homeless shelter and delivered this report from the front line of a worsening national crisis.
Adelaide's Hutt Street Centre is a bustling haven for the homeless. A place to get a hot meal, a shower and recharge. More than 180 people rely on this centre every day, but the growing demand means some are turned away.
What we have to do is manage the peak periods at the moment and encourage people, if they haven't got a reason to be in the centre, to try and make space for others to get in.
Nationally, women and children make up 73% of those seeking help, according to the latest Australian Institute of Health and Welfare data. Those fleeing domestic and family violence are the largest group in need.
In the last 4 years, we have seen a 42% growth in demand for our wellbeing centre services. But what's more concerning is in that same period, we've seen a 77% growth in females accessing our services.
On average, 820 people access the centre, and 30% of those clients are First Nations, and those numbers are rising every week.
It's about country and dreaming.
For Noongar man Perry Collard, the centre provided more than meals and shelter. It offered dignity, connection and survival.
I was living out the front in the swag. The hospital chucked me out. I was too rowdy for them. So I was out the front here and they come along and offered me help. And I grabbed it with both hands.
Homeless providers say the housing crisis is driving the surge in demand and is calling for the government to build more social housing.
Housing that is subsidised by government and that they rent it out on a subsidised basis for people such as our clients.
Since receiving his house, for Perry, the journey to independence has also been cultural, reconnecting through art, healing and community.
Strange for the first year. I felt like I wanted to go back out and live on the street because I started arguing with the neighbours. But I'm all good. I love it there. And I paint there, doing my art there.
A success story in the face of growing need.
The Mi'kmaq Chiefs are fed up with the latest actions of Nova Scotia's Conservative government. So much so, one Mi'kmaq community chief and council has banned government officials from their lands. Video journalist Angel Moore gives us a preview of that story.
I'm here at the Sipekne'katik Mi'kmaq Nation, where Chief and Council voted unanimously to pass a ban council resolution. It bans Premier Tim Houston and his ministers Leah Martin and Scott Armstrong from the Sipekne'katik First Nation. This comes after Nova Scotia directed police to crack down on cannabis shops that do not operate under provincial regulation. Sipekne'katik Chief Michelle Glasgow says this is a direct threat to community safety. I'll have more of this story on APTN National News.
Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And it's a full moon over Beaver Lake, Alberta. Nice one. Today's submission comes from Ingo. Appreciate you sharing. If you have a picture you want featured on APTN National News, email them to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, +3 with snow for Fredericton, 8 above, and showers for Halifax. -12 under sunny skies in Kuujjuaq, 11 below in Nain. -1 with flurries in Montreal, -7 in Val-d'Or with snow. 4 below in Sault Ste. Marie, cloudy and -3 in North Bay. Sun's out and -6 for Thunder Bay, 12 below in Sioux Lookout. -14 for God's Lake and Norway House. Sunny and -11 for Winnipeg, 13 below for Dauphin and Brandon. -10 in Regina, sunny and 13 below in North Battleford. -20 in Uranium City, Stony Rapids and Buffalo Narrows. In northern Alberta, a chilly day, -26 for High Level, 22 below for Fort Chipewyan. -14 in Edmonton, sunny and +2 in Lethbridge. 7 with showers in Vancouver, cloudy and 10 for Victoria. -1 in Prince George, 5 below for Smithers. minus 26 in Old Crow, 32 below in Whitehorse, minus 28 in Yellowknife, minus 31 in Norman Wells, 21 below for Sax Harbor and Paulatuck, minus 24 in Baker Lake, 23 below in Chesterfield, minus 29 in Resolute, 12 below in Pangertown. Time now for our segment about Indigenous languages in the holiday season. It's APTN News' version of the 12 Days of Christmas. And with 11 work days left until Christmas, we bring you some Plains Cree teachings.
My name is Wayne Faithful. I'm from Frog Lake, Alberta. I've been living in Winnipeg for past 15 years. First language is Cree, Plains Cree, as was raised by my grandmother and mom. And my grandma was a spiritual individual. So when it came to that Christmas time, very particular in making sure that we had plenty of food. Food was a huge factor for her to show them that the house was a place of love. Asam. The word is asam, to feed. You could go further, go asam haisino, means to feed the person. Feasts, at the end of the day, is a very important ceremony, and so there's a few purposes for feast. To feed the relatives that passed on, and so we always had to smudge the food. That was always a big thing, smudging the food. Then the feast to celebrate any other thing, any other, like it could be accomplishments amongst a certain family member, maybe he or she graduated. The other biggest thing for Christmas was miagasagi is the other word. Miagasagi is smudging, and of course that's all over, not just us Plains Cree, but the other Native tribes. That was a huge factor, because then you're inviting the spirits to also join in on your meal, past relatives, because at the end of the day you do make a plate of food, a small plate of food as an offering. Miagasagi.
Miagasagi.
That's smudging in Cree. I guess not just Christmas, but our normal teacher, everything was surrounded around food.
Very nice. I am awful at math, but even I know there are more than 11 days of work before Christmas. Well, he joined the Canadian Armed Forces Reserves at 17 and has served the country in various roles over the years, including an active role with the Bold Eagle program. Tonight, Chief Warrant Officer Joel Pedersen joins us in an all-new face-to-face, where he also shares with Tiara Wheatley that he was adopted through the AIM program in Saskatchewan during the 60 Scoop.
I often am not sure how to talk about this. You know, like I don't have a horrible story to share, I don't think. But again, it all depends on how you look at it. I was born in Saskatoon. My biological mother was from the far north in Saskatchewan, from the Fond du Lac, Uranium City area. And my biological father was also from that far north area. And I don't really know the complete story of why I was into the foster system in Saskatchewan, but I was in that. And just really grateful that my mom and my dad were able to adopt me through the AIM program. You know, it actually, in my opinion, it worked for my benefit.
Great episode, and you can catch the entire interview in less than 90 seconds from now. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for this Tuesday, December the 9th. For news anytime, though, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And Creason will be here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow with your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Stick around. Face to Face is next. Have a great night.